My name is Stacy, 32 years old, and I always thought family meant everything. Growing up, my parents taught me we help each other in times of need. So when they called about Dad's medical bills, I immediately canceled my Lake Tahoe trip and wired them $5,200. 1 week later, I accidentally discovered cruise tickets for my entire family. Everyone except me. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Sacramento, my family appeared perfectly normal from the outside. My father, Harold, a high school history teacher, with a booming laugh that could fill a room, always had a way of making every story sound like the most fascinating thing you had ever heard. My mother, Diana, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, always coming home with tales of her patients that somehow made us appreciate our lives a little more. My younger brother, Jackson, followed in Dad's footsteps and became a teacher too, while my sister, Amanda, chose the artistic path as a graphic designer. Then there was me, Stacy, the oldest and supposedly most reliable child. I had always been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, studied hard, and eventually landed a job as a marketing executive at a growing tech company in San Francisco. My parents never failed to mention how proud they were of my success, especially when introducing me to their friends. From childhood, I had shouldered the weight of being the example for my siblings. While they got away with C's and D's, I was expected to bring home straight A's. When they spent their summers lounging by pools, I worked part-time jobs to save for college. My 20s were a blur of overtime hours, missed social events, and declining vacation days to climb the corporate ladder. By 32, I had the title and salary my parents could brag about at neighborhood barbecues, but I was running on fumes. The burnout had been creeping up on me for months. 14-hour days merged into weekends spent answering emails. My apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, had become nothing more than a place to shower and sleep. The dark circles under my eyes had become a permanent feature, and my doctor had started making concerned comments about my blood pressure during my last physical. That was when I decided I needed a break. Not just a weekend getaway, but a proper vacation where I could disconnect completely. Lake Tahoe seemed like the perfect choice. Growing up, my family had visited once when I was 10, and those memories of crystal-clear waters and towering pines had stayed with me for over 2 decades. I remembered how peaceful it felt, how the rest of the world seemed to disappear when looking out across that vast blue expanse. I spent 8 months planning and saving for this trip. Despite my good salary, living in San Francisco meant most of my paycheck went to rent and student loans. I created a special savings account and labeled it Lake Tahoe Fund, transferring a portion of each paycheck religiously. I tracked airfare prices, researched accommodations, and made lists of hiking trails and water activities I wanted to try. I eventually booked a beautiful cabin on the North Shore, with a deck overlooking the water and a stone fireplace for the cool evenings. I scheduled kayaking lessons, found the best spots for sunrise photography, and even splurged on a sunset dinner cruise. My friend Zoe from college agreed to join me, both of us desperate for an escape from our demanding careers. The weekend before the final payment was due for the cabin, I called my parents during our weekly Sunday chat to share my excitement. Mom picked up on the second ring, immediately launching into a story about the neighbor's new landscaping disaster. When she finally paused for breath, I said, "Mom, I have some good news. I finally booked that Lake Tahoe trip I have been saving for. Remember when we went there, when I was 10? "Oh, sweetie, that is wonderful," she replied, her voice warming. You work too hard. A vacation will do you good. We spent the next 20 minutes with me describing the cabin and all my plans. Dad got on the line, too, reminiscing about our family trip all those years ago. Jackson and Amanda joined the call briefly, both jokingly complaining about how jealous they were. I am so happy for you, Stacy, my mother said before hanging up. You deserve this break more than anyone I know. Those words would come back to haunt me later. The excitement built as the trip drew closer. I bought new hiking boots, a waterproof camera, and even splurged on some expensive sunscreen that promised not to harm the lake ecosystem. At work, I meticulously documented all my ongoing projects and created detailed handover notes for my colleagues. For once, I was putting myself first, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. 3 days before departure, I had lunch with Zoe to finalize our plans. We sat at our favorite cafe, spreading maps and printouts across the small table. I still cannot believe we are finally doing this, Zoe said, highlighting a trail on the map. 6 days of nothing but nature, good food, and absolutely no emails. I know, I replied, feeling a lightness I had not experienced in years. I think I might even leave my laptop at home. Zoe gasped in mock horror. Who are you, and what have you done with workaholic Stacy? We laughed, clinked our coffee mugs, and toasted to freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I felt genuine anticipation instead of anxiety about the future. Everything was falling into place, and I could almost feel the crisp mountain air filling my lungs. If only I had known what was coming. 2 nights before my departure date, I was in my bedroom, carefully folding clothes into my suitcase. I had created a detailed packing list weeks ago, checking items off one by one, with the satisfaction of someone who rarely has time for such orderly preparations. The weather forecast for Lake Tahoe promised sunny days and cool nights, perfect for hiking and evening bonfires by the lake. My phone rang at 9:45 p.m., unusually late for a family call. Seeing my mother's name on the screen, I felt a flutter of concern. Mom, is everything okay? I asked immediately, noticing the strain in her voice when she answered. Oh, Stacy, she said, her words tumbling out between what sounded like suppressed sobs. It is your father. We just got back from the hospital. My stomach dropped as I sank onto the edge of my bed, the carefully folded sweater still in my hand. What happened? Is he all right? She explained that Dad had experienced severe chest pains earlier that evening. They had rushed him to the emergency room, fearing a heart attack. After several hours and multiple tests, the doctors had ruled out a heart attack, but found concerning irregularities that required immediate follow-up with a specialist. They did all these tests, Stacy, she continued, her voice quivering. The insurance is giving us trouble about coverage since we had to go to an out-of-network hospital. The bills just came in, and they are asking for payment up front before they will schedule the specialist appointment. How much are we talking about? I asked, already reaching for my laptop. $5,200, she replied quickly, as if she had been waiting for the question. I would not ask, sweetie, but your father's appointment is urgent. The specialist only had an opening for next week, and if we do not secure it with payment, we might have to wait months. I opened my banking app, staring at the balance in my Lake Tahoe fund. $5,312. The result of 8 months of careful saving and overtime projects. What about your emergency fund? I asked, remembering how my parents had always emphasized the importance of having savings for unexpected situations. We used it last month when the roof started leaking, remember? Dad's teacher salary barely covers the mortgage, and my hours were cut at the hospital. She paused, then added in a smaller voice, I hate to even suggest this, but what about your vacation money? Could you possibly postpone your trip just for a little while until we get back on our feet? I sat in silence, my mind racing. This was my father's health we were talking about. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me move into my first apartment, who still called me his little star, even though I was in my 30s. But I cannot help wondering if there are other options, I said carefully. Maybe a payment plan with the hospital. Or I could lend you half now and half next month. Stacy, my mother's voice hardened slightly. This is your father's heart we are talking about. The specialist needs payment before they will even see him. I would not ask if it was not serious. I heard my father's voice in the background, though I could not make out his words. Your father wants to talk to you, Mom said, and then Dad was on the line. Pumpkin, he said, using my childhood nickname. I am sorry about all this. I told your mother not to bother you, but these chest pains have me scared. He sounded weak, his normally robust voice diminished. If you cannot help, we will figure something out. Maybe I can wait a few months to see the specialist. The guilt crashed over me in waves. How could I prioritize a vacation over my father's health? What kind of daughter would that make me? No, Dad, I will help. Of course I will help, I said already, mentally calculating cancellation fees and wondering if any of my deposits were refundable. Just send me the account details, and I will wire the money first thing tomorrow. The relief in both their voices was palpable. They showered me with gratitude, promising to pay me back as soon as they could, though we all knew that was unlikely given their financial situation. After ending the call, I sat in my half-packed apartment, surrounded by the hiking clothes and new boots that would now be stored away. I picked up my phone again to make the hardest call. Zoe was silent after I explained the situation, then sighed deeply. That really sucks, Stacy. I am so sorry. Are you sure there is no other way? Could they put it on a credit card? I have already decided, I said firmly. It is my dad. I cannot just leave him without medical care while I am off having fun. After hanging up, I spent the next hour canceling reservations. The cabin owner was sympathetic, but could only refund 30% of my payment since it was such short notice. The kayaking instructor kept my deposit. The airline offered a credit minus a $100 change fee. All told, I lost nearly $700 in non-refundable deposits on top of the money I was about to send my parents. The next morning, I dragged myself to my bank and initiated the wire transfer for $5,200 to my parents' account. The bank teller gave me a concerned look when I explained it was for medical bills. That is a lot of money, she commented. I hope everything turns out okay. Me too, I replied, signing the final authorization form. I texted my parents to let them know the money had been sent. Mom replied with a brief, "Thank you, sweetie." Dad says, "Thank you too. We will call soon." That was it. No lengthy expression of gratitude, no update on when they would schedule the appointment. Just a quick acknowledgement, and then silence. Over the next few days, as I should have been enjoying mountain views and fresh air, I threw myself back into work. My boss was surprised to see me, but seemed pleased by my dedication. I did not tell anyone, except Zoe, the real reason I had canceled my trip. It felt too personal, too painful to explain. I tried calling my parents several times that week, but kept getting their voicemail. The few texts they did respond to were uncharacteristically brief. Just busy with doctor appointments. Will call soon. When I specifically asked about Dad's appointment with the specialist, Mom replied, "All handled. Thank you again for your help." Their sudden unavailability struck me as odd, but I rationalized it as them being preoccupied with Dad's health concerns. Still, a nagging feeling began to grow in the pit of my stomach. Our family had always been close, with long Sunday phone calls and detailed updates about even the most mundane events. This new distance felt wrong. By the end of the week, neither Jackson nor Amanda had returned my calls either. When I checked social media, I noticed an unusual silence from my entire family. No new posts, no updates, no check-ins. For a family that typically documented everything from coffee outings to new haircuts, the silence was deafening. That Friday, as I sat at my desk working through lunch, my colleague Melanie stopped by. "I thought you were supposed to be at Lake Tahoe this week," she said, setting a coffee on my desk. "What happened?" "Family emergency," I replied vaguely. "Dad had some health issues." Melanie frowned. "Is everything okay now?" "I honestly do not know," I admitted. "They have been pretty quiet about the whole thing." "That is strange," she commented. "Usually families over-communicate during health scares." Her words struck a chord. She was right. When my grandmother had been hospitalized 2 years ago, we had received hourly updates from my mother. This silence was completely out of character. That night alone in my apartment, where I should have been unpacking from a rejuvenating vacation, I felt the first real pangs of something beyond disappointment, something that felt dangerously close to suspicion. The financial impact of my canceled trip hit harder than expected. Beyond the $700 in lost deposits, there was the emotional cost of returning to work when I should have been taking a desperately needed break. My colleagues, tiptoeing around me, unsure whether to ask about my sudden reappearance, only made it worse. The process of unwinding my carefully made plans felt like dismantling a dream piece by piece. Each cancellation email represented another small death of the joy I had been cultivating. The new hiking boots sat in their box by the door, a physical reminder of what should have been. Calling Zoe to explain everything in detail had been particularly difficult. We had planned this trip together for months, coordinating our limited vacation days and budgets. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Zoe had asked, concern evident in her voice. $5,000 is a lot of money, Stacy, and it is not like your parents to ask for financial help like this. "It is for Dad's medical care," I had replied defensively. "What am I supposed to do? Let him wait months to see a specialist when he is having chest pains?" Zoe had paused before responding carefully. "I understand that. I do. But something about this feels off. Why would they call you instead of using credit cards or working out a payment plan with the hospital? Most medical facilities are willing to work with patients." "You do not understand how tight their finances are," I had said, perhaps too sharply. "They do not have room on their credit cards, and Dad's teacher salary barely covers their basic expenses." But Zoe's doubt had planted a seed in my mind, one I tried desperately to ignore. The days following the money transfer settled into an uncomfortable pattern. I would call my parents and get their voicemail. I would text and receive minimal responses hours later. When I specifically asked about Dad's appointment with the specialist, the answers were vague and deflective. "He is doing better. Doctor says not to worry." When I pressed for details about the diagnosis or treatment plan, Mom replied, "Too complicated to explain over text. We'll fill you in when things settle down." 5 days after sending the money, I tried a different approach and called my brother Jackson directly. "Hey sis, what is up?" he answered, sounding slightly breathless as if he had been exercising. "Just checking in on Dad," I said. "Mom and Dad have been pretty vague about his condition, and I am worried." Oh, there was a pause longer than natural. "Yeah, it has been a bit crazy around here with all the appointments and stuff. But he is doing better, I think." "What did the specialist say exactly?" I pressed. Something about medication and monitoring." "Look, I am actually heading into a meeting right now. Can I call you back later?" He hung up before I could respond, and predictably, never called back. That same day, I tried reaching my sister Amanda through Instagram direct message since she wasn't answering texts. Amanda, please call me. I am really concerned about Dad, and no one is giving me straight answers. Her response came hours later. Sorry, been super busy with a work deadline. Dad is fine. Stop worrying so much. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I pulled out my journal and began documenting the strange behavior. When written down, the pattern became even more suspicious. No one would provide specific medical information. No one had time to talk. Everyone was suddenly too busy for our normally tight-knit family communication. I took out my laptop and logged into my bank account, staring at the withdrawal record. $5,200. Gone. The Lake Tahoe fund now held just $112, not even enough for a decent weekend getaway. The next day at work, I confided in my colleague Melanie during our lunch break. She listened attentively as I explained the situation, her brow furrowing deeper with each detail. Stacy, she said finally, I do not want to alarm you, but this sounds really suspicious. If your father had a genuine health scare with a specialist involved, your family would not be avoiding your calls. They would be sharing every detail of his diagnosis and treatment. I know I admitted the words painful to say aloud. I have been trying to ignore that feeling, but something definitely feels wrong. Have you checked their social media? Melanie asked. Maybe there are clues there. That is the thing, I replied. No one has posted anything all week, not even Amanda, who usually posts 3 times a day. That night, I found myself unable to sleep, replaying every conversation, analyzing every text. The parents who had raised me to value honesty above all else were now being evasive and distant. The siblings I had grown up sharing secrets with were suddenly too busy to talk. The weight of lost vacation days, lost money, and potentially lost trust pressed down on me like a physical presence. I had given up something I desperately needed, believing it was for a good cause, but now I wondered if I had been naive. I tossed and turned until 3 a.m, then gave up on sleep altogether. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I scrolled through old family photos on my phone. Us at Christmas last year. Dad looking healthy and robust as he carved the turkey. Mom laughing as she handed out presents. Jackson and Amanda bickering playfully over the last piece of pie. Had I imagined the closeness we once shared? Was I overthinking their sudden distance? The rational part of my brain suggested that perhaps they were just busy with genuine medical concerns. The emotional part whispered darker possibilities I wasn't ready to face. As the sun rose on what would have been my 4th day at Lake Tahoe, I made a decision. I would give them one more day to provide a real explanation. Then I would drive to Sacramento and see for myself what was going on. Little did I know I wouldn't need to make that drive. The truth was about to find its way to me more painful than I could have imagined. The following Monday started like any other workday. I dragged myself out of bed after another restless night, made coffee on autopilot, and caught the 7:15 bus to the office. The familiar routine offered some comfort, even as my mind continued to churn with questions about my family's strange behavior. By lunchtime, I had managed to focus enough to complete a presentation for an upcoming client meeting. Deciding I deserved a proper break, I walked to a nearby cafe instead of eating at my desk as I typically did. While waiting for my order, I pulled out my phone and mindlessly scrolled through social media. That was when I saw it. A post from my cousin Tyler, who lived in Florida and rarely interacted with our side of the family. The photo showed a crowded cruise ship terminal with passengers lined up to board. The caption read, "Ran into Uncle Harold and Aunt Diana at Port Canaveral's Small World number Family Cruise number Royal Caribbean." I froze, my finger hovering over the screen. In the background of the photo, partially obscured by other passengers but unmistakable, were my parents. My father, supposedly in need of urgent cardiac care, was smiling broadly, a colorful Hawaiian shirt, replacing his usual button-downs. Beside him stood my mother's sunglasses perched on her head, looking relaxed and happy. Not at all like someone worried about her husband's health. With trembling fingers, I zoomed in on the image. Behind them, I could make out Jackson's tall frame and Amanda's distinctive red hair. My entire family was there. Everyone except me. The cafe around me faded into background noise as I frantically searched Tyler's profile for more photos. There were none, but the single image was damning enough. I then searched for the cruise line mentioned in the hashtag and found that a 7-day Caribbean cruise had departed from Port Canaveral the previous day. The starting price $5,000 for a family of 4. Almost exactly the amount I had sent them. I must have made a sound, because the barista called out asking if I was okay. I nodded mechanically, grabbed my untouched lunch, and rushed back to the office. Locking myself in a bathroom stall, I tried to control my breathing as the full implication hit me. There had been no medical emergency, no specialist appointment, no chest pains. It had all been a lie to get me to fund their family vacation, a vacation they had deliberately excluded me from. Back at my desk, I continued my investigation with single-minded focus. I found the cruise itinerary online, 7 days in the Caribbean, stopping at Nassau St. Thomas and the cruise line's private island. I checked the booking dates and discovered the cruise had been available for reservation for months. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This was planned. At 4:30, unable to concentrate on work any longer, I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and went home early. In the privacy of my apartment, I finally allowed myself to fall apart. The tears came in violent waves, accompanied by gulping sobs that left me gasping for air. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it felt like a physical blow. When the initial shock subsided, I called my parents' cell phones repeatedly. Both went straight to voicemail. Of course they did. They were probably in the middle of the ocean by now, their phones in airplane mode, or unable to receive calls. I sent text messages to both of them. I know about the cruise. I saw Tyler's photo. How could you do this to me? Then I called Jackson, who surprisingly picked up on the third ring. The connection was poor, with the distinct sound of wind and ocean in the background. "Hello," he shouted over the noise. "I know where you are," I said, my voice deadly calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "I know about the cruise. I saw Tyler's photo." There was a long pause then. "Shit. Stacy, listen. It is not what you think." "Really? Because it looks like you all used my $5,200, the money I sent for Dad's supposed medical bills, to go on a family cruise without me. Please tell me how that could possibly be not what I think." "Look," he lowered his voice, and I could hear him moving to a quieter location. "It was Mom and Dad's idea, okay? They said you are always too busy for family stuff anyway, that you would not have been able to take time off work. I literally had a vacation planned that I canceled to send them that money," I said, incredulous. A vacation they knew about. A vacation I had been saving for 8 months. "Yeah, well," another uncomfortable pause. "Dad said it was not like you could not afford it, that you make more than all of us combined." The casual cruelty of the statement left me speechless. I had worked incredibly hard for my salary, had sacrificed weekends, relationships, and my health to climb the corporate ladder, and now that success was being used against me, as if it somehow made me less deserving of honesty or inclusion. "Where is Dad now?" I finally asked. "At the casino, I think," Jackson replied, then seemed to realize his mistake. I mean, the casino. My father, supposedly suffering from cardiac issues so severe they required specialist intervention, was gambling on a cruise ship. Put Mom on the phone, now, I demanded. I heard muffled conversation. Then my mother's voice came on the line. Stacy, sweetheart, we were going to tell you. When I interrupted. After you got back, or were you planning to just never mention it? We did not think you would mind helping out the family, she said, her tone shifting to one I recognized from childhood. The one she used when she was trying to make me feel guilty for questioning her decisions. You have always been so generous, and you know our situation is not like yours. This is not about the money, Mom. This is about the lying. You made me believe Dad was sick. You made me cancel my vacation, the first real break I have taken in years, because you said it was a medical emergency. Well, your father has been under a lot of stress lately, she replied, her voice defensive. His blood pressure has been high. The doctor did recommend relaxation. I laughed bitterly. So you decided a cruise would be the perfect prescription. And rather than saving up for it yourselves, or I do not know, inviting your daughter to join you, you created an elaborate lie to get me to pay for it. You are overreacting, Stacy, she said dismissively. We were going to pay you back eventually. And it is not like you cannot book another vacation. You have that fancy job in the city. The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes. No apology, no acknowledgement of the harm they had caused, just deflection minimization and subtle jabs about my career and lifestyle choices. When I finally hung up, I felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from my chest. Later that evening, Amanda sent a text. Sorry you found out this way. For what it is worth, I told them we should have just asked you directly to help fund the cruise. That was it. Not sorry they had lied. Just sorry I had discovered the truth. I sat in my darkened apartment until midnight, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal. The bank statement showing the transfer. The cruise itinerary I had printed out. Tyler's social media post saved to my phone. The reality I had tried so hard to deny was now undeniable, documented in pixels and paper. My family had not only excluded me, but had manipulated and deceived me in the cruelest way possible. They had used my love and concern against me, exploiting my sense of responsibility to fund their own enjoyment. As the clock ticked past midnight, something inside me hardened. The tears dried up. The shock faded. In its place grew a cold, clear certainty that things could never be the same again. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I could not face presenting marketing strategies and smiling through client meetings while my entire personal foundation was crumbling. Instead, I sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by family photos I had removed from walls and shelves. 29 years of memories spread around me, like evidence at a crime scene. There I was at 6, holding my father's hand at my kindergarten graduation, looking up at him with complete adoration. Here was a Christmas morning when I was 12, all of us, in matching pajamas surrounded by wrapping paper and laughter. A more recent photo showed us at my brother's wedding 2 years ago, arms linked, smiling for the camera as if we were the perfect family everyone thought we were. Had it all been an illusion, or had something fundamentally changed without my noticing? I picked up my phone and texted my friend Jennifer, who worked as a therapist. I need to talk. Family crisis. Are you free? Her response came quickly. Come over at noon. Bringing lunch. Jennifer's apartment was a sanctuary of calm, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture that seemed to invite confidences. As I recounted the entire story, from the frantic call about Dad's health to the discovery of the cruise deception, she listened without interruption. her professional demeanor softened by our years of friendship. When I finished, she took a deep breath. Stacy, what you are describing is a profound betrayal of trust, and it sounds like this might not be an isolated incident. What do you mean? I asked. You mentioned that you have always been the responsible one, the one they turn to in a crisis, the one who sacrifices. Has that been a lifelong pattern? The question made me uncomfortable, but I forced myself to consider it honestly. There had been other incidents over the years. The time I had loaned Amanda $2,000 for graduate school application fees, only to discover she had used it for a spring break trip to Cancun. The way my parents had pushed me to attend a local college so I could live at home and help care for my grandmother while encouraging Jackson to accept a scholarship across the country. The countless family gatherings I had rearranged my work schedule to attend only to have others cancel at the last minute without consequence. Yes, I admitted quietly. It has always been this way. I just never saw it so clearly before. Jennifer nodded. In family systems, we often see one child assigned the role of caretaker or fixer. It is not usually discussed openly, but it becomes an unspoken expectation. Your success in your career may have intensified this dynamic, creating resentment on both sides. They resent your independence and achievements while simultaneously expecting you to use those achievements to benefit them. But to lie about a medical emergency, I still could not wrap my mind around the callousness of it. That crosses a significant boundary, Jennifer agreed, and their reaction when confronted the lack of genuine remorse suggests this is deeply ingrained behavior. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think you need to ask yourself what kind of relationship you want with your family moving forward. One that continues this pattern or something different. That night, I researched family dynamics and emotional manipulation. I read articles about adult children of emotionally immature parents, about family scapegoats, and golden children, about the complex web of obligation and guilt that can bind families together in unhealthy ways. So much of it resonated with my experiences that I felt simultaneously validated and devastated. The more I read, the more clearly I saw the pattern that had defined my life. My sense of responsibility had been weaponized against me. My success had become a justification for exploitation rather than a source of pride. My boundaries had been consistently violated, my needs dismissed. As dawn broke on my second sick day, I made a decision. I would not confront them with anger or accusations when they returned. I would not give them the opportunity to gaslight me further or minimize what they had done. Instead, I would quietly disappear from their lives. Not dramatically or vengefully, but methodically and purposefully. I would set boundaries, not by declaring them loudly, but by simply enforcing them through my actions. I would reclaim my time, my resources, and my emotional energy from people who had proven they did not value them. I spent the next hours creating a detailed plan. I would find a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one they were not familiar with. I would change my phone number and create new email addresses. I would update my privacy settings on social media and be selective about what I shared. I would inform my workplace that any family emergencies should be verified directly with me before information was shared. These weren't angry decisions, they were protective ones. I wasn't cutting them off entirely, but I was creating a buffer zone, a space where I could heal and reassess what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to maintain. The plan gave me a sense of control in a situation where I had felt powerless. It transformed me from a victim of their manipulation to a woman making conscious choices about her own life. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I slept through the night, waking with a sense of clarity that had been missing for days. I returned to work the following day, throwing myself into projects with renewed focus. My colleagues noticed the change, commenting on my energy and decisiveness. What they didn't know was that each completed task, each successful meeting, was another brick in the foundation of my independence. I was no longer working to earn family approval or to be the success they could brag about. I was working for myself, for the life I wanted to build. That weekend, I began apartment hunting, focusing on secure buildings with doormen who could screen visitors. I found a promising option in a neighborhood across town, more modern than my current place, but with the same beautiful views. The leasing agent could have it ready in 3 weeks, perfect timing for my plan. I also researched new job opportunities, not because I disliked my current position, but because I wanted to explore options that might offer more flexibility and less stress. A lateral move to a different company might provide the fresh start I was craving. As I implemented these changes, I composed a message to send to my family after they returned from their cruise. Not an emotional outpouring or a list of grievances, but a clear, factual statement. I know about the cruise and the lie about Dad's health. I am taking some time away from our family dynamic to reassess what kind of relationship works for me going forward. Please respect my need for space. I will reach out when I am ready. The message was firm but not cruel, assertive without being aggressive. It established my boundary without inviting debate or justification. Most importantly, it put me in control of the next steps, rather than reacting to their actions. By the end of that weekend, my plan was in place. Apartment application submitted. Job application sent. Phone company notified about an upcoming number change. Email filters created to route family messages to a separate folder I could check when emotionally prepared. The woman who had once dropped everything at the first hint of family need was learning to prioritize her own well-being. The daughter who had measured her worth by her usefulness to others was discovering her intrinsic value. The reliable Stacy, who could always be counted on to sacrifice, was becoming someone who understood that self-care wasn't selfish, but essential. As I closed my laptop that Sunday evening, I felt something unexpected pride, not in my career achievements or financial success, but in my courage to recognize an unhealthy pattern and take steps to change it. The pain of betrayal was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs. But alongside it grew a new feeling, the quiet strength of someone who had faced a painful truth and chosen to grow from it rather than be diminished by it. The cruise would end in 4 days. My family would return to their normal lives, perhaps expecting me to eventually get over my anger and fall back into familiar patterns. They had no idea that while they sailed through blue Caribbean waters, I was charting a new course of my own, one that would forever change our family's landscape. My family's cruise ended on a Sunday. By Monday morning, my phone was flooded with messages as they returned to cell service range. Most were defensive or dismissive. From Mom, "You are making too big a deal of this. We deserve a vacation too." From Dad, "Your mother handled this poorly, but your reaction is excessive." From Jackson, "Come on, sis. Everyone makes mistakes." From Amanda, "Can we just move past this? Family is family." I read each message once, then filed them away without responding. Their collective inability to acknowledge the depth of their betrayal only reinforced my decision. On Tuesday, I signed the lease for my new apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a secure building across town. The move-in date was set for the following week. That same day, I purchased a new phone with a new number, keeping my old one active to monitor communications until I was ready to make the switch complete. Wednesday brought a surprise interview request from a marketing firm I had applied to. They were impressed by my portfolio and wanted to meet as soon as possible. The position offered similar pay but better work-life balance, and the option to work remotely 2 days a week. I scheduled the interview for Friday morning. By Thursday, my family's messages had shifted from defensive to concerned. From Mom, Stacy, please call us. We are worried about you. From Dad, this silent treatment is childish. We need to talk this through. On Friday morning, I aced my job interview, connecting instantly with the creative director and appreciating the company's more collaborative culture. By Friday afternoon, I had a job offer with a start date 4 weeks out, giving me time to properly transition from my current role. That evening, I sent the message I had prepared to my family. I know about the cruise and the lie about Dad's health. I am taking some time away from our family dynamic to reassess what kind of relationship works for me going forward. Please respect my need for space. I will reach out when I am ready. Their responses were predictable. My mother called 6 times in a row, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. My father texted that I was overreacting and needed to stop being so sensitive. Jackson sent a confused message, asking if I was seriously cutting off the family over one mistake. Amanda alone seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, sending a simple, "I understand. Take the time you need." The weekend was spent methodically preparing for my new life. I sorted through belongings, donating items I no longer needed, and packing essentials. I updated my address with banks, subscription services, and government agencies. I created a new email address and began the process of migrating important communications. On Monday, I submitted my resignation at work, explaining to my surprised boss that I had received an opportunity that better aligned with my personal goals. She was disappointed but supportive, asking only that I help train my replacement before departing. By Wednesday, word had reached my family that something more significant than a temporary silent treatment was underway. My mother showed up unannounced at my apartment, ringing the buzzer repeatedly until a neighbor let her into the building. I was at work, but my doorbell camera captured her banging on my door for nearly 20 minutes before giving up. That night, she left a tearful voicemail. "Stacy, people in the neighborhood are saying you are moving, that you quit your job. What is going on? You cannot just disappear because you are mad at us. We are your family." I did not respond. The following week, I moved into my new apartment. The process was smooth, thanks to my careful planning. By Friday evening, I was settled in my new space, surrounded by familiar belongings arranged in unfamiliar patterns. The view from my windows faced west instead of east, offering stunning sunsets instead of sunrises. It felt symbolic somehow. 2 days later, Jackson showed up at my old apartment building, presumably sent by our parents to check on me. The property manager, whom I had informed of my departure, told him I had moved out and left no forwarding address. According to the text he sent afterward, he was shocked that I had gone to such extremes over what he called a simple misunderstanding. A simple misunderstanding. That phrase crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. They genuinely could not see the depth of their betrayal or the years of pattern it represented. In their minds, I was the one being unreasonable by enforcing consequences for their actions. 3 weeks after discovering the cruise deception, I activated my new phone number and redirected all calls from my old number to voicemail. I kept the old phone powered to monitor messages, but no longer carried it with me. The constant notifications had been affecting my sleep and concentration. The physical distance created by my move and the digital distance created by my new contact information gave me space to breathe and reflect. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, my decisions were truly my own. I was not calculating the impact on family expectations or preparing justifications for choosing my own path. 1 month into my new life, I received a letter at my workplace. It was from Amanda. Unlike the rest of the family, she had respected my request for space and not attempted to contact me after my initial message. "Dear Stacy," she wrote, "I have been doing a lot of thinking about what happened and my role in it. While I did not create the lie about Dad's health, I went along with it. I knew it was wrong, and I said nothing. I am deeply sorry for that. I miss you, and would like to rebuild our relationship, but only when and if you are ready. If you ever want to talk, I am here." It was the first genuine acknowledgement from anyone in my family that what they had done was truly wrong. I put the letter aside, not ready to respond, but appreciating its sincerity. As summer turned to fall, I settled into my new job and new home. I made friends at work, joined a hiking group that explored local trails on weekends, and even started dating someone I met at a neighborhood cafe. My life was fuller and more balanced than it had been in years. The hardest test came with the approaching holiday season. Thanksgiving had always been a major family gathering at my parents' house. This would be my first year absent from the table. In early November, the messages from my family intensified, ranging from guilt trips to angry accusations to sad reminiscences of holidays past. I held firm. Instead of going home, I accepted an invitation from my new hiking friends to join their Thanksgiving potluck. Surrounded by people who accepted me without expectations or history, I found myself genuinely enjoying the holiday for the first time in memory. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my brother, Jackson. "Dinner was weird without you," he said, his voice slightly slurred from what I assumed was holiday drinking. "Mom cried during the toast. Dad barely said 2 words all night." I remained silent, not wanting to be drawn into emotional manipulation. "Look," Jackson continued, growing frustrated with my lack of response. "I get that you are mad about the cruise thing, but this is getting ridiculous. It is like you died or something. You changed your number, moved without telling anyone. Amanda will not even tell us if she has heard from you." "That is my choice," I finally said, "and I would appreciate you respecting it." "But we are family," he protested, falling back on the familiar refrain. "You cannot just cut us off like this." "I am not cutting anyone off," I replied calmly. "I am creating boundaries. There is a difference." "Whatever," he scoffed. "You have always thought you are better than the rest of us anyway, with your fancy job and your big city apartment. I guess now you have the perfect excuse to leave us all behind." The old Stacy would have defended herself, would have protested that she had always been there for the family, had always put their needs first. But the new Stacy recognized the attempt to flip the script to make her the villain in this story. "I think we are done here," I said instead. "Please do not call this number again." As I hung up, I realized something important. The pain of their betrayal had diminished, not because I had forgotten or forgiven, but because I had grown beyond the need for their approval or understanding. Their opinions, once so central to my self-image, had become peripheral to my sense of worth. That night, I added a new photo to my wall, not of my biological family, but of my hiking group, all of us windswept and smiling atop a mountain ridge. It was the first of many such photos, a visual representation of the family I was choosing to build around me. People who respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without resentment, and cared for me without conditions. 6 months after the cruise incident, I had created a life that felt authentically mine. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth every difficult step. I had not just physically removed myself from a toxic family dynamic. I had emotionally liberated myself from patterns established since childhood. The woman who had once measured her value by her usefulness to others now understood her intrinsic worth. The daughter who had been exploited for her success now celebrated that success on her own terms. The reliable Stacy, who could always be counted on to sacrifice, had become someone who knew when to give, and just as importantly, when to protect herself. It was not the path I would have chosen. But sometimes the roads we are forced to take lead us to exactly where we need to be. June marked the 6-month anniversary of my discovery of the cruise deception. It also marked the beginning of summer in San Francisco, bringing with it longer days and warmer temperatures. As I packed my car for a weekend getaway, I felt a lightness that had been absent for much of my adult life. My destination, Lake Tahoe. The trip I had been forced to cancel half a year ago was finally happening, though, with several significant changes. Instead of going with Zoe, I was traveling with 3 friends from my hiking group. Instead of staying in the cabin I had originally booked, we had rented a lakeside house better suited for our larger group. And instead of the woman I had been then anxious to please and quick to sacrifice, I was going as the woman I had become, confident, boundary-aware, and prioritizing my own well-being alongside others. The drive to Tahoe was filled with music and laughter, 4 women sharing stories and snacks as the landscape gradually transformed from city to mountains. As we rounded the final bend and the vast blue lake came into view, I felt a surge of emotion that caught me by surprise. This moment had been stolen from me once. Reclaiming it felt like a victory. Our weekend unfolded in a blur of hiking trails, kayaking adventures, and evenings spent around a fire pit sharing wine and stories. On our final night, as my friends headed to bed, I remained outside alone, watching moonlight play across the water. The beauty and peace of the moment prompted reflection on the journey of the past 6 months. The initial weeks after discovering my family's betrayal had been almost unbearably painful. I had cycled through grief, rage, and profound sadness, sometimes experiencing all 3 in a single day. There had been moments when I questioned my decision to create such firm boundaries, when the loneliness of separation from my family had felt overwhelming. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, healing had begun. Like a wound that slowly closes the raw pain, had subsided, replaced by a tender awareness that would likely always remain, but no longer dominated my consciousness. I had found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, and our weekly sessions had helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns that had defined my family relationships. I had learned to identify and challenge the beliefs that had made me vulnerable to exploitation, that love meant sacrifice, that setting boundaries was selfish, that my value lay in what I could provide rather than who I was. Each realization had been a step toward freedom from the constraints that had limited me for so long. My relationship with my family had evolved in different ways with different members. My parents remained the most resistant to acknowledging their role in what had happened. They had progressed from angry denial to wounded victimhood, positioning themselves as the real victims of my unreasonable reaction. I maintained minimal contact, responding to direct messages with brief factual replies, but initiating no communication of my own. My brother Jackson vacillated between supporting our parents' narrative and expressing confused regret about how everything had unfolded. He had reached out several times, usually when drinking, with messages that ranged from hostile accusations to nostalgic reminiscences of our childhood. I responded selectively, engaging only when his communication seemed genuine rather than manipulative. Amanda had taken a different path. After her initial letter, She had respected my need for space, while occasionally sending updates about her life with no expectation of response. 3 months after the cruise incident, I had finally replied, and we had begun a careful rebuilding of our relationship. She had been the only family member to offer a genuine apology without qualifications or demands for immediate forgiveness. 2 months ago, we had met for coffee, our first face-to-face encounter since the family fracture. The conversation had been awkward at first, weighted with unspoken history, but had gradually eased into something resembling our old connection. "I have been seeing a therapist," she had admitted, stirring her latte nervously, "trying to understand why I went along with their lie when I knew it was wrong. Why I have always gone along with things I knew were wrong." "That took courage," I had replied, genuinely impressed by her self-reflection. "I am trying to be more like you," she had said, with a small smile. "Standing up for myself, setting boundaries. It is harder than I thought." We had parted with a hug and a promise to meet again, a tiny green shoot of new growth from what had seemed like scorched earth. Beyond my family, other aspects of my life had flourished in ways I could not have anticipated. My new job challenged me creatively, while respecting my need for work-life balance. I had developed friendships based on shared interests rather than obligation or history. I had even begun a promising relationship with Alex, a software engineer I had met through my hiking group, who understood and supported my family boundaries without judgment. Most significantly, I had rebuilt my relationship with myself. The constant anxiety that had once been my companion had diminished considerably. The need for external validation had been replaced by an inner confidence in my choices and values. The guilt that had shadowed so many of my decisions had given way to a clearer understanding of personal responsibility versus inappropriate obligation. As I sat by the lake that final night in Tahoe, I realized that what had initially felt like a devastating loss had ultimately been a catalyst for profound growth. The family betrayal had forced me to confront patterns I might otherwise have continued indefinitely. The pain had been real and significant, but so was the liberation that followed. The next morning, as we packed to return to San Francisco, I took one last walk along the shore alone. The water lapped gently at the rocks, constant yet ever-changing, much like life itself. I picked up a smooth stone and held it in my palm, feeling its weight and texture. Family, I had learned, was not just about blood or shared history. It was about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. Sometimes the family we create through chosen connections honors those principles more fully than the one we are born into. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to recognize when relationships have become harmful and have the courage to establish new patterns. I tossed the stone into the lake, watching the ripples expand outward in perfect circles. That was how healing worked, I realized. It started from a single point of decision and radiated outward, affecting every aspect of life in ways both expected and surprising. The woman who returned from Lake Tahoe was not the same one who had tearfully canceled her trip 6 months earlier. She was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate even toward herself. She understood that true generosity came from fullness rather than depletion, that healthy relationships enhanced rather than diminished both parties, and that boundaries were not walls but vital definitions of selfhood. Most importantly, she had learned that disappearing from toxic situations was not an act of cowardice, but one of profound courage. Sometimes walking away quietly and deliberately was the most powerful statement one could make. As our car wound down the mountain roads toward home, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for much of my life. The future stretched before me not as a predetermined path dictated by family expectations, but as an open landscape of possibilities I was now free to explore on my own terms. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship that was hurting you, even when it broke your heart to do so? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply to quietly vanish from situations that diminish us, making room for the life we truly deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on yours.